Hello and welcome back. We are up for the most incredible session right now, and this is actually one that I've been wanting to get to all day because there is so many people that have reached out to us that are interested in STEM careers, careers in science, and today you'll be able to ask all your burning questions to Lynette Beattie, who is actually the research associate at the Uni of Melbourne. She is an amazing woman. I'm just going to rattle off some of the things that she's done, and then we'll bring Lynette live. So, she's actually from Queensland. In 1997, she did and completed a Bachelor of Applied Science, Medical Laboratory Science at the University of Technology. In 2000, she actually did 1 year of honours at QUT. She has worked in, she's done a PhD in immunology by research. Now, I am going to get Lynette to explain a lot of this stuff for you guys. But over the course of her career, she has an expertise in immunology and how the body responds to infection and to vaccines. Think about infectious diseases, think about COVID, what we're going through right now. Lynette has worked in Australia. She has worked overseas. So I'm going to, without further ado, I'm going to bring Lynette live to the CareerCon stage and we'll get into some awesome conversation. So welcome, Lynette. Thank you for joining.
Hi, Kira. Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure.
No, well, thank you very much for joining, and apologies for being a little bit late, a little bit behind. Hopefully we can get through a lot of the questions that we had, because a lot of them actually come from people that want, and students want to work in your industry. So let's get into it. Can you take us back to, explain a little bit about Lynette growing up in Queensland and explain the kind of things that you were into and why you chose the career path that you're on currently?
Yeah. So I went to high school in Brisbane, to just a public high school in Brisbane, and my parents didn't go to university, so they always valued education, but I didn't have an academic background at all in my family. So in high school, I enjoyed high school. It was fun. I did a lot of things that I enjoyed, but I also really liked science. So I enjoyed a lot of subjects, but science was kind of one thing that I kept coming back to that I really enjoyed. So I didn't really know, though, what kind of career I could have in science. I didn't have any role model or anyone I could ask about it. So towards the end of school, and when it came to applying for university positions, I spoke to someone who said that they worked in pathology labs, so diagnostic laboratory science labs. So when you get a blood test taken, your blood gets sent to these pathology labs. And I thought, well, that's a career that I can understand in science. So that's the path I took at that time. Yeah. But now it's very different.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. So I know a little bit about your backstory, and I find it really interesting about what actually happened. The kind of things that you're interested in from year 12 onwards. So, and can you explain a little bit about that next step? Because was it that you wanted to be a fighter pilot?
Yeah. When I was at school, I really wanted to be a pilot, and I thought, that was the path I was on. So I applied to the Australian Air Force Academy, realised that I probably didn't have a high enough level of understanding of mathematics to be a pilot in the Australian Defence Forces. So instead, on a whim, decided to change my path after speaking to this person about science. And I knew I had liked science, but I didn't actually study biology at high school. I applied. I got reasonable marks out of school, and I got a high enough entry score to get into med lab science at QUT. I did it. And the other path was aerospace avionics. I would have needed to be much better at maths, so I didn't go down that path, but it was the other option.
It's interesting because, you mentioned that you weren't that good at maths, but from an onlooker looking into your industry, I always believe that you would need to have an understanding of maths. So that's awesome for anyone that's, studying in high school right now and they're like, oh, get me out of further maths, or maths methods and I don't want to do it. That's interesting that you can still do something within a science industry and not love that as a subject. So,
and I think also I didn't study biology at high school and yet I'm now a biologist. So, the choices you make at high school don't determine the path you have to go on at all. So.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. I mean, that sort of, leads really nicely into the next question, Lynette, because and I think that this is probably one of the industries where, it might be a great idea to go on to further education, but maybe you've got a different perspective. Do you believe that, that people need to have, gone to further education, whether it be uni or TAFE or, to get into the industry that you're in now?
I would say yes. So right now I work in research science at a university. So I'm biased because everyone that I work with has been to university and has at least a degree. But I think, TAFE and further education to me has a lot of benefits. And it's not to say it's for everyone. I think different paths are important, but I think there's a lot of benefits to going to university or TAFE or further education. And what it does is it teaches you how to think like the career that you've chosen. So you study law, you'll learn to think like a lawyer. If you study science, then you learn to think like a scientist. And it's not actually the facts that you absorb, it's more the way that it teaches you to think that I think is important. And also it sets you up for the networks that you create, and the people you meet will potentially become your colleagues, and you can also have a lot of fun by doing further study in a tertiary education type thing. So
yeah, no, I agree. Essential, a massive theme that we're discussing and we're unpacking during the last 2 days of CareerCon is this whole kind of notion around skills and skill sets, because, we've just come out of National Skills Week and, it's so topical right now, and it's actually something that, we always hear about, even on your resume, list your skills. What kind of skills do you believe that we need to have to work in your industry, whether it be in any of the jobs that you've worked in, and what is your best skill?
Okay, so I think in my current role, the skill that I use most is communication. And I think that's true for all jobs I've ever had. So as a scientist, I have an obligation to communicate my results to the granting agencies that fund my research, my colleagues, to the general public, and that's a big part of my role, but also communication in both ways. So it's really important that I'm open to communication from other people. I need to absorb information from other people and kind of apply that to my own work and my own research. So I think there's a kind of growing expectation that scientists communicate their research to the general public through social media platforms, and Twitter has become a really big tool for scientists to promote their research. So I think communication on all levels, skills in that are kind of paramount for most careers these days, I think. But I think the other thing is resilience and tenacity, because a hard part of science is that experiments don't always go the way that you want them to. You don't get the results that you were hoping for. So yeah, having the ability to pick yourself back up again and move forward and keep working hard in spite of maybe not always getting the result you were hoping for is a pretty big skill too.
Yeah, that's a massive skill. Yeah. So, I mean, your career and the current role that you're in right now is, I'd love for you to just explain it to us, Lynette. Like, you are a research associate, but what exactly does that mean? And maybe can you, even give us an example of something that you're working on right now, or maybe something that you've worked on in the past, just to sort of give us a bit of a bird's eye view onto your career.
Yeah. So after my undergraduate degree, I did a full 1 year honours in research. So I spent a year working in a laboratory. I was given a project that I had to run with and troubleshoot. And at the end of that year, spending a year in the lab, I had to write up a thesis, which I submitted. And then I moved on to a PhD, which was 4 years of full-time research. But at that point, you start to get paid. So I had a scholarship, and that paid for my university costs, but also a living allowance for me to be able to live and feed myself. And that involved kind of spending all day, every day in the lab running experiments. I spent a lot of time sitting in a microscope. And at the time I worked on malaria, so parasitic disease, that's a major problem in the third world, trying to understand how our bodies respond to the malaria parasite. So when I finished my PhD, I moved to the UK, and again, I was in a lab full-time, looking at the immune response, so how your body responds to a different parasitic infection, which is a big problem in the third world, and yeah, publishing the results. So an average day for me now is a bit different. I have a bit less time in the lab because I'm spend more time supervising students and supervising my research assistant. But mostly it's just looking at data, interpreting it, writing it up, writing grants to get funding, just generally thinking about how things work in our body.
Wow, that's awesome. I mean, you know, malaria, you know, I find all of these things that you've worked on just so fascinating, because it's something that you know is always happening, but it's not actually, you know, just even in the news and popular culture, like it's not really something that we hear about a lot, but there are all of these people behind the scenes working to keep us safe, you know, like even in COVID, like this moment that we're in now, you know, has there been a change in the lab that you're in? If a new infectious disease comes out, like, you know, like COVID-19, do you all change gears and you know, go and find a solution for that?
Yes, that has happened. Not me specifically. So my research is still focused on what I was doing prior to COVID. It's a little bit harder to do it now because of the restrictions that are in place, but we're still considered permitted workers. So we are still in the lab. Even during COVID. But I work at the Beattie Institute, which has really become, in Melbourne, one of the faces of the research response to COVID. So a lot of the people in our building are working on that. They're getting patient samples from the hospital every day. They're looking at how those patients' cells are responding to the virus. There's people testing the potential vaccine candidates and trying to generate new vaccine candidates or test therapies that might help in the response to COVID. So the entire building has undergone a big pivot to COVID-19 research, and that's what this building is for. That's what the Beattie Institute was established for. There's a big public health team who've been advising the government on how to respond to this disease. So yeah, it's an exciting place to be. There's a lot going on, and it's really interesting to hear what people are doing.
Yeah, well, we've got some great questions that have come through. So I'm going to hit you up with some questions, and hopefully, I think you'll be able to handle these questions, Lynette. The first one that we've got is that I'm looking at going to QUT. Did you like it? And you know, maybe you can elaborate a little bit about your experience at that uni as well.
Yeah, so QUT is a good university. It's one of the more kind of modern technology-focused universities, and because it's in the city, it's got a real kind of downtown feel about it. There's, you know, you spend your days going into the city every day, so that's it's a good place to be. I think the courses are well structured, and they've always prided themselves on being focused on, in my day, I don't know if they've changed their slogan, but they used to be the university for the real world. So that was my experience. Yeah, and I think my course taught me a lot about how to function as a scientist. I think it's a good,
Yeah, wonderful. It must be hard. I mean, let's just think about it this way. It must be hard for, someone that's finished high school. You see all of these universities and all of these colleges and that are all pumping all of their marketing at you. And, it must be hard to really, find one, from the bat, what you want to, apply to and go to. So, I mean, it's awesome to know that you thought that it was a really good place. And I love that slogan. That's awesome. The next question that we've got for you, Lynette, is about, this is a good one, actually. Have you ever met someone that works in your industry that didn't go to uni?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of peripheral jobs in the science industry that are scientific support. There's people that work in this building that support scientists in all kinds of ways, administration, through teaching support, through helping us with procuring reagents and making sure that all the contracts are in place. And there's a lot of support roles in that way. In terms of research science, the people in the lab, undergraduate students do sometimes come in and do work experience and things like that, but I don't know of anyone who operates as a scientist in the lab that doesn't have some kind of further education. But yeah, there's a lot of support that we get from people who are not university trained.
Yeah, no, thanks for that.
That's very focused on research. I mean, STEM as an industry is massive, and I can't claim to know all of the facets of that, but I'm sure there are. Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting that you mentioned that it is a massive industry, because I know that we've had a conversation before actually, joining us at CareerCon in regards to, there's this whole big thing about women in STEM related industries. And there is actually a question in the chat box right now about, as a scientist, do you see many women in your job? And I think that it's really interesting to know there is, such an incredible, vast industry that is the STEM industry. So do you see at your level a lot of women scientists, or even within the institute that you're in? Is there a lot of women that are actually in, senior roles in that industry?
There are some. I wouldn't say there are a lot, and it's a major issue in the STEM industry. That there are a lot of people working really hard to address, actually. So at my level, I'm at the career level where the numbers of women participating in my industry really takes a nosedive. So we have really good percentages of women in the early career stages in the biological sciences. And once those women take career breaks and reach a point where they need to be promoted through the triangle of promotion through to professorships, there's less females present, and that's an issue that really needs to be addressed. But at the Doherty Institute, we have some really good role models. The director of our institute is a woman, a very impressive, capable, amazing woman. We have some really senior scientists who run big research labs that are women, and yeah, we have people to look up to now. But yeah, that's taken a while to get there, and more broadly within other STEM sectors, maths and physics and engineering, it's even worse. It's even harder to get to more senior roles as a woman. But that we just need to be the change ourselves and exactly. Keep pushing hard for us to get there. And yeah, I think there's a lot of things in place that will help over time.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think that's why I believe that an event like CareerCon is so important right now, because it gives people visibility. You can actually see what it is that you can achieve, because look at all of these amazing people that have done it before you. And it's important to see those people. Like, it's important to see yourself as a senior member within the institute, and leading teams. And it's important to give people visibility of that. So, I mean, that's the perfect ending to the segment, but it's not over yet. We've got a great question that's come through from Kate, and she's actually said, if you study to be a scientist, is it easy to branch into other fields, or is it quite restrictive?
No, it's easy and it's so diverse. Science is such a good background for so many things. And this morning, I actually sat down and wrote a list of all the things that friends of mine that I've trained with have gone on to do other things. And the list is huge. So, for example, I have a friend that works for L'Oreal in Paris as a scientist. I've got friends that work in pharmaceutical companies, both as scientists and in administrative and communication roles. I've got friends that do teaching, that do lecturing, who work in clinical trials companies. One friend who's now a pastry chef, because science is a really good background for that, because you understand the processes, and she's amazing at it. Patent attorneys, people who've gone on to study medicine, because science is a fantastic background for being a doctor. The scientific sales, technical support, editorial, journalism, it keeps going. It's a really good background for a huge number of roles. And I think when I wanted to study science at university, I got a little bit paralyzed by not knowing where I would go after I'd done my degree, which is why I went for a very practical degree that had a very defined outcome. But actually, you could do a basic science degree and go into any number of industries. So, yeah, it's a really good starting point.
Thank you very much for adding that in, because, it does sound like that science is just an amazing sort of, springboard to multiple different things. And I think, personally, I think that careers within this kind of sector are they just seem so fulfilling and rewarding. And, just being able to actually do real things to make a real change. I just put my hands up to you guys. I think that it's amazing. But before we let you go, Lynette, I am going to ask you a question though, just one final question. And it's a question that we're asking everyone that appears on the virtual stage. And that's about what's one piece of advice that you would have given 17, 18-year-old Lynette, growing up in Brizzy, what's one bit of advice that you would have given her back then?
It's an awesome question, and I've thought about this a lot. I think it would be brave, because I have an older sister who is very wise, and she sent me a card, and it says in it, and I've held on to this, you're smarter than you think and more capable than you realize. And it's so true. It's so easy to get fooled into thinking that everyone else has their shit together and you're the only one that doesn't. And it's really not true. Everyone else is scrambling. And just ask for help. Put yourself out there, be brave, seek out a mentor that you admire and ask them if they can support you, because actually the most flattering thing for me now at my stage in my life and career is when someone asks me for help. And that, be brave, ask people for help, find yourself a cheer squad, because you're going to need it at some points, but have people that around you that will support you, and just go for it, really. But I think if 17-year-old me, I would probably tell myself to go back and study bioinformatics, because data is such a big thing right now. And if you're interested in biology and you have any interest at all in data, study bioinformatics, because it's the science of the future, in my opinion.
Ooh, that's amazing. We've just got a really interesting question that's come through. It just pipped at the corner of my eye, and it's like, do you mind repeating the quote that your sister sent you? So what was that? That was,
It was, you're smarter than you think and capable than you realize. And I don't know if she got it from somewhere else, but I'm quoting her, because she's been championing that for a long time for me, and having someone there who's cheering you on is, it helps you get through some things sometimes.
Yeah. And what you just mentioned then too, Lynette, it doesn't just ring true for science related industrial careers. It's across the board. I think that's awesome. And if there are any students or anyone that's interested in a career, whether it be sciences or even even doing anything that you kind of do at the institute, or can they reach out to you? What's the best way to do that? Is that through LinkedIn or Instagram or?
Yes, any of the above. I confess, as a scientist, I'm not the best at social media platforms. I'm trying hard to learn. LinkedIn, yes. Email, old-fashioned email is also good. You can find my email address on the Doherty website, or Instagram.
We'll
I'm new to Instagram, so yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I think even from a person that's not entirely across this kind of industry, I just find everything that you do so amazing and so fascinating. So thank you for being a part of CareerCon and for sharing all that knowledge. Enjoy the rest of this rainy day. And thank you again, Lynette. Truly appreciate everything that you've done. So thank you.
Thank you, Kira. I've really enjoyed it.
No worries. Thanks.